The waitress who concentrates on giving the best possible service needn't worry about tips. They'll be there. But her counterpart who overlooks the empty coffee cups, why refill them? They don't look like tippers. Won't find any gratuities. The secretary who resolves to make those letters look better than the boss expects will do all right on future paychecks. But the secretary who thinks, why worry about a few smudges? What do they expect for $65 a week? She is stuck at $65 a week. The salesman who gives full service to an account need harbor no fears he'll lose the account. Here is a simple but powerful rule that will help you to develop the put service first attitude. Always give people more than they expect to get. Each little extra something you do for others is a money seed. Volunteering to work late and get the department out of a tight spot is a money seed. Giving customers extra service is a money seed because it brings customers back. Advancing a new idea that will increase efficiency is a money seed. Money seeds, of course, grow money. Plant service and harvest money. Spend some time each day answering this question. How can I give more than is expected of me? Then apply the answers. Put service first, and money takes care of itself. In quick recap, grow attitudes that will carry you forward to success. 1. Grow the I'm activated attitude. Results come in proportion to the enthusiasm invested. 3 things to do to activate yourself are: dig into it deeper. When you find yourself uninterested in something, dig in and learn more about it. This sets off enthusiasm. Life up everything about you. Your smile, your handshake, your talk, even your walk. Act alive. Broadcast good news. No one ever accomplished anything positive telling bad news. 2. Grow the you are important attitude. People do more for you when you make them feel important. Remember to do these things. Show appreciation at every opportunity. Make people feel important. Call people by name. 3. Grow the service-first attitude and watch money take care of itself. Make it a rule in everything you do. Give people more than they expect to get. Chapter 9. Think right toward people. Here is a basic rule for winning success. Let's mark it in the mind and remember it. The rule is, success depends on the support of other people. The only hurdle between you and what you want to be is the support of others. Look at it this way. An executive depends on people to carry out his instructions. If they don't, the company president will fire the executive, not the employees. A salesman depends on people to buy his product. If they don't, the salesman fails. Likewise, a college dean depends on professors to carry forward his educational program. A politician depends on voters to elect him. A writer depends on people to read what he writes. A chain store magnate got to be a chain store magnate because employees accepted his leadership and consumers accepted his merchandising program. There were times in history when a person could gain a position of authority through force and hold it with force and/or threats of force. In those days, a man either cooperated with the leader or risked literally losing his head. But today, remember, a person either supports you willingly or he doesn't support you at all. Now it's time to ask, granted, I depend on others in order to achieve the success I want. But what must I do to get these people to support me and accept my leadership? The answer, wrapped up in one phrase, is think right toward people. Think right toward people, and they will like and support you. This chapter shows how. Thousands of times daily, a scene like this takes place. A committee or group is in session. The purpose, to consider names for a promotion, a new job, a club membership, an honor, someone to be the new company president, the new supervisor, the new sales manager. A name is placed before the group. The chairman asks, "What is your feeling about so-and-so?" Comments come forth. For some names, there are positive remarks, such as, "He's a good fellow. People there speak highly of him. He has a good technical background, too." Mr. F? "Oh, he's a personable sort of man, very human. I believe he would fit in well with our group." Some names draw negative, lukewarm statements. "I think we should investigate that fellow carefully. He doesn't seem to get along too well with people. I know he has a good academic and technical background. I don't question his competence, but I am concerned about the acceptance he would receive. He doesn't command much respect from people." Now, here is an exceptionally important observation. In at least 9 cases out of 10, the likability factor is the first thing mentioned. And in an overwhelmingly large number of cases, the likability factor is given far more weight than the technical factor. This holds true even in selecting scholars for university professorships. In my own academic experience, I've sat in on a considerable number of occasions when names for new faculty personnel were under question. When a name came up, the group would weigh most carefully thoughts such as, will he fit in? Will students like him? Will he cooperate with others on the staff? Unfair? Unacademic? No. If the fellow isn't likable, he can't be expected to get through to his students with maximum effectiveness. Mark this point well. A person is not pulled up to a higher level job, rather he is lifted up. In this day and age, nobody has time or patience to pull another up the job ladder, degree by painful degree. The individual is chosen whose record makes him stand higher than the rest. We are lifted to higher levels by those who know us as likable, personable individuals. Every friend you make lifts you just one notch higher, and being likable makes you lighter to lift. Successful people follow a plan for liking people. Do you? People who reach the top don't discuss much their techniques for thinking right toward people. But you would be surprised how many really big people have a clear, definite, even written plan for liking people. Consider the case of President Lyndon Johnson. Long before he became president, Johnson, in the process of developing his amazing power of personal persuasion, developed his own 10-point formula for success. His rules, which even a casual observer of the president can see are practiced in everything he does, are quoted directly. 1. Learn to remember names. Inefficiency at this point may indicate that your interest is not sufficiently outgoing. 2. Be a comfortable person, so there is no strain in being with you. Be an old shoe kind of individual. 3. Acquire the quality of relaxed, easygoing, so that things do not ruffle you. 4. Don't be egotistical. Guard against the impression that you know it all. 5. Cultivate the quality of being interesting so people will get something of value from their association with you. 6. Study to get the scratchy elements out of your personality, even those of which you may be unconscious. 7. Sincerely attempt to heal on an honest basis every misunderstanding you have had or now have. Drain off your grievances. 8. Practice liking people until you learn to do so genuinely. 9. Never miss an opportunity to say a word of congratulation upon anyone's achievement, or express sympathy in sorrow or disappointment. 10. Give spiritual strength to people, and they will give genuine affection to you. Living these 10 simple but tremendously powerful like people rules makes President Johnson easier to vote for, easier to support in Congress. Living these 10 rules makes President Johnson easier to lift. Listen to these rules again. Notice that there's no get-even philosophy here. There's no let the other fellow come to me to patch up differences. There's no I know it all, other people are stupid. Big people, Those on top in industry, the arts, sciences, and politics are human, warm. They specialize in being likable. But don't try to buy friendship. It's not for sale. Giving gifts is a wonderful practice if the gift is backed up with genuine sincerity, a liking to give, and liking for the person to whom it is given. But without real sincerity, the gift is often regarded as nothing more than a payoff or a bribe. Last year, just a few days before Christmas, I was in the office of the president of a medium-sized trucking firm. Just as I was about to leave, in marched a delivery man with a gift of liquid refreshment from a local tire recapping firm. My friend was obviously provoked, and with a certain amount of chill in his voice, asked the delivery man to return the gift to its sender. After the delivery man left, my friend hastened to explain to me, "Don't misunderstand. I like to give gifts, and I like to get them." Then he named a number of gifts he had already received from business friends that Christmas. "But," he went on, "when the gift is just an attempt to get my business, an obvious bribe, I don't want it. I quit doing business with that firm 3 months ago because their work isn't what it should be, and I don't like the employees. But their salesman keeps on calling. What burns me," he continued, "is that last week that same blank salesman was in here and had the gall to say, 'I sure would like to get your business back. I'm going to tell Santa to be real good to you this year.' If I hadn't sent their booze back, the first thing that so-and-so would have said to me next time he's in is, 'I'll bet you enjoyed our gift, didn't you?' Friendship can't be bought, and when we try, we lose in 2 ways. 1, we waste money. 2, we create contempt. Take the initiative in building friendships. Leaders always do. It's easy and natural for us to tell ourselves, let him make the first move. Let them call us. Let her speak first. It's easy, too, virtually, to ignore other people. Yes, it's easy and natural, but it isn't right thinking toward people. If you follow the rule of letting the other person build the foundation for friendship, you may not have many friends. Actually, it's a mark of real leadership to take the lead in getting to know people. Next time you are in a large group, observe something very significant. The most important person present is the one person most active in introducing himself. It's always a big person who walks up to you, offers his hand, and says, "Hello, I'm Jack R." Digest this observation for a moment, and you'll discover the reason the fellow is important is that he works at building friendships. Think right toward people. As a friend of mine expresses it, I may not be very important to him, but he's important to me. That's why I've got to get to know him. Have you ever noticed how people freeze while waiting for elevators? Unless they are with someone they know, most folks never say anything to the person standing beside them. One day, I resolved to do a little experimenting. I resolved to say something to the stranger who was waiting as I was. I kept track of his reaction 25 consecutive times, and 25 times I got back a positive, friendly response. Now, talking to strangers may not be very urbane, but most people like it nevertheless. And here is the big payoff. When you make a pleasant remark to a stranger, you make him feel 1 degree better. This makes you feel better and helps you relax. Every time you say something pleasant to another person, you compensate yourself. It's like warming up your automobile on a cold morning. Here are 6 ways to win friends by exercising just a little initiative. 1. Introduce yourself to others at every possible opportunity, at parties, meetings, on airplanes, at work, everywhere. 2. Be sure the other person gets your name straight. 3. Be sure you can pronounce the other person's name the way he pronounces it. 4. Write down the other person's name, and be mighty sure you have it spelled correctly. People have a fetish about the correct spelling of their own names. If possible, get his address and phone number also. 5. Drop a personal note or make a phone call to the new friends you feel you want to know better. This is an important point. Most successful people follow through on new friends with a letter or a phone call. 6. And last but not least, say pleasant things to strangers. It warms you up and gets you ready for the task ahead. Putting these 6 rules to work is really thinking right about people. To be sure, it is not the way the average person thinks. Mr. Average never takes the initiative in making introductions. He waits for the other person to introduce himself first. Take the initiative. Be like the successful. Go out of your way to meet people. And don't be timid. Don't be afraid to be unusual. Find out who the other person is and be sure he knows who you are. Recently, an associate and I were retained to do a preliminary screening of an applicant for an industrial sales job. We found the applicant, whom we'll call Ted, to have some good qualifications. He was exceptionally intelligent, made a fine appearance, and seemed to have a lot of ambition. But we found something that forced us to disqualify him, at least temporarily. Ted's big limitation was this: he expected perfection in other people. Ted was annoyed by many little things, like mistakes in grammar, people who were messy with cigarettes, people who had bad taste in clothes, and so on. Ted was surprised to learn this fact about himself, but he was eager to get into higher-paying work, and he asked whether there was anything we could tell him to help overcome his weakness. We made 3 suggestions. 1. Recognize the fact that no person is perfect. Some people are more nearly perfect than others, but no man is absolutely perfect. The most human quality about human beings is that they make mistakes, all kinds of them. 2. Recognize the fact that the other fellow has a right to be different. Never play God about anything. Never dislike people because their habits are different from your own, or because they prefer different clothes, religion, parties, or automobiles. You don't have to approve of what another fellow does, but you must not dislike him for doing it. 3. Don't be a reformer. Put a little more live and let live into your philosophy. Most people intensely dislike being told you're wrong. You have a right to your own opinion, but sometimes it's better to keep it to yourself. Ted conscientiously applied these suggestions. A few months later, he had a fresh outlook. He now accepts people for what they are, neither 100% good nor 100% bad. Besides, he says, the things that used to annoy the heck out of me, I now find amusing. It finally dawned on me what a dull world this would be if people were all alike and everybody was perfect. Note this simple but key fact. No person is all good and no person is all bad. The perfect person just doesn't exist. Now, if we let our thinking go uncontrolled, we can find much to dislike in almost anyone. By the same token, if we manage our thinking properly, if we think right toward people, we can find many qualities to like and admire in the same person. View it this way. Your mind is a mental broadcasting station. This broadcasting system transmits messages to you on 2 equally powerful channels, Channel P, positive, and Channel N, negative. Let's see how your broadcasting system works. Suppose that today your business superior, we'll call him Mr. Jacobs, called you into his office and reviewed your work with you. He complimented you on your work, but he also made some specific suggestions on how you can do it better. Tonight, it's only natural for you to recall the incident and do some thinking about it. If you tune in Channel N, the announcer will be saying something like this: "Watch out! Jacobs is out to get you. He's a crab. You don't need any of his advice. To heck with it. Remember what Joe told you about Jacobs? He was right. Jacobs wants to grind you down like he did Joe. Resist him. Next time he calls you in, fight back. Better still, don't wait. Tomorrow, go in and ask him just what he really meant by his criticism. But tune in Channel P, and the announcer will say something along these lines. You know, Mr. Jacobs is a pretty good fellow. Those suggestions he made to me seem pretty sound. If I put them to use, I can probably do a better job and position myself for an increase. The old boy did me a favor. Tomorrow I'll go in and thank him for his constructive help. Bill was right. Jacobs is a good man to work with. In this specific case, if you listen to Channel N, you're almost certain to make some bad, perhaps fatal mistake in your relations with your superior. But if you are tuned to Channel P, you are definitely certain to benefit from your superior's suggestions and at the same time draw yourself closer to him. He will appreciate that visit. Try it and see. Bear in mind that the longer you stay tuned to either Channel P or Channel N, the more interested you become and the harder it is to switch channels. This is true because one thought, positive or negative, sets off a whole chain reaction of similar thought. You may, for example, start off with such a simple minor negative thought as a person's accent, and find yourself soon thinking negatively about such unrelated topics as his political and religious beliefs, the car he drives, his personal habits, his relationship with his wife, even the way he combs his hair. And thinking this way surely won't get you where you want to go. You own it, so manage your thought broadcasting station. When your thoughts turn to people, make Channel P your listening habit. If Channel N cuts in, say stop, then switch channels. To make the switch, all you must do is think of one positive quality about the individual. In true chain reaction style, this one thought will lead to another and another, and you will be glad. When you are alone, you and only you can decide whether you will listen to Channel P or Channel N. But when you are talking with someone else, that person has a measure of control over how you think. We must remember that most people do not understand the concepts of thinking right toward people. So it's a very common experience for people to come rushing to you, just aching to say something negative about a person you both know. A coworker wants to tell you about the objectionable qualities of another employee. A neighbor wants to let you know the domestic problems of another neighbor. Or a customer wants to itemize the faults of his competitor, whom you will call on next. Thoughts breed like thoughts. There is real danger that if you listen to negative comments about another person, you too will go negative toward that person. In fact, if you are not on guard, you may actually find yourself adding fuel to the fire with, "Yes, and that's not all. Did you hear?" type of comment. These things backfire, boomerang. There are two ways to prevent others from switching us from Channel P to Channel N. One way is to switch topics as quickly and quietly as possible with some remark like, "Pardon me, John, but while I think of it, I've been meaning to ask you." A second way is to excuse yourself with a, "Sorry, John, I'm late now," or, "I've a deadline to meet. Will you excuse me?" Make a forceful promise to yourself. Refuse to let others prejudice your thinking. Stay tuned to Channel P. Once you've mastered the technique of thinking only good thoughts about people, greater success is guaranteed. Let me tell you what an unusually successful insurance salesman told me about how thinking good thoughts about people pays off for him. "When I first got in the insurance business," he began, "the going was tough, believe me. At first, it seemed there were about as many competing agents as there were prospects. And I soon learned what all insurance men know, that 9 prospects out of 10 firmly believe they don't need any more insurance. I'm doing well, but let me tell you, it's not because I know a lot about the technical side of insurance. That's important, don't misunderstand me. But there are men trying to sell insurance who know policies and contracts better than I. In fact, I know one man who wrote a book about insurance, but he couldn't sell a policy to a man who knew he had only 5 days to live. My success, he continued, is based on one thing. I really like the guy I'm selling. Let me say again, I really like him. Some of my fellow salesmen try to pretend they like the other fellow, but this won't work. You can't even fool a dog. Your mannerisms, eyes, facial expressions, all spell PHONY when you pretend. Now, when I'm gathering information about a prospect, I do what every other agent does. I get his age, where he works, how much he makes, how many kids he's got, and so on. But I also get something else, which most salesmen never search for. That is, some sound reasons why I can like the prospect. Maybe the job he's doing will supply the reason, or perhaps I can find it someplace in his past record. But I find some good reasons to like him. Then, whenever my attention is focused on the prospect, I review the reasons why I like him. I build a likable image of the prospect before I say one word to him about insurance. This little technique works. Because I like him, he sooner or later likes me. Pretty soon, instead of sitting across the table from him, I'm on the same side with him, and we're working out his insurance plan together. He trusts and believes in my judgment because I am a friend. Now, people don't always accept me right off the bat, but I've found that so long as I continue to like a fellow, he'll come around and we can get down to business. Just last week, my friend went on, I was making the third call on a difficult prospect. He met me at the door, and before I could even say good evening, he proceeded to give me hell. He went on, not even stopping for a breath until he had run down and finished with, "And don't ever come back here again." After he had said that, I just stood there looking into his eyes for about 5 seconds, and then said softly and with genuine sincerity, because I meant it, "But Mr. S., I'm calling tonight as your friend." Yesterday, he bought a $250,000 endowment policy. Saul Polk is popularly called the appliance king of Chicago. Starting with nothing, Saul Polk now sells millions of dollars worth of appliances in a year in metropolitan Chicago. Saul Polk credits a lot of his success to his attitude toward shoppers. "Customers," says Mr. Polk, "should be treated like they are guests in my home." Isn't that thinking toward people? And isn't it about the simplest success formula one can put to work? Just treat customers like guests in your home. This technique works outside the store too. Substitute the word employees for customers so that it reads, "Employees should be treated like guests in my home." Give first-class treatment to your employees, and you get first-class cooperation, first-class output. Think first class about everyone around you, and you'll receive first-class results in return. One of the reviewers of an early version of this book is a close personal friend who owns his own business management consulting firm. When he read the above illustration, he commented, "That's the positive result of liking and respecting people." Let me give you a personal experience of a friend of mine which shows what happens if you don't like and admire people. His experience has a big point. Here it is. My firm obtained a contract to provide consulting services to a relatively small soft drink bottling concern. The contract was substantial. The client had little formal education. His business was in bad shape, and in recent years he had made some very costly mistakes. 3 days after we had got the contract, an associate and I were driving out to his plant, which was about 45 minutes from our offices. To this day, I don't know how it started, but somehow we began talking about the negative qualities of our client. Before we realized it, we were talking about how his own stupidity had brought about the mess he was in, instead of discussing how we could best approach solving his problems. I remember one remark I made which I thought particularly clever. "The only thing holding up Mr. F is fat." My associate laughed and came up with an equally choice observation. And that son of his, Junior, must be all of 35, but the only qualification he has for the job he's holding is he speaks English. The whole drive out, we talked about nothing else but what a weak-minded numbskull we had as a client. Well, the conference that afternoon was cold. Looking back, I think our client sensed somehow the way we felt toward him. He must have thought, these fellows think I'm stupid or something, and all they're going to do for my money is give me some smooth-sounding talk. 2 days later, I got a 2-sentence letter from this client. It said, "I've decided to cancel our contract for your consulting services. If there is a charge for your services to date, please bill me." Printing ourselves with negative thoughts for only 40 minutes cost us a contract. What made it even more painful was learning about a month later that this former client had contracted with an out-of-town firm for the professional assistance he needed. We would never have lost him had we concentrated on his many fine qualities, and he has them. Most people do. Here's how you can have some fun and discover a basic success principle at the same time. For the next 2 days, listen in on as many conversations as you can. Note 2 things. Which person in the conversation does the most talking, and which person is the more successful. Hundreds of my own little experiments have revealed this. The person who does the most talking and the person who is the most successful are rarely the same person. Almost without exception, the more successful the person, the more he practices conversation generosity. That is, he encourages the other person to talk about himself, his views, his accomplishments, his family, his job, his problems. Conversation generosity paves the way to greater success in 2 important ways. 1. Conversation generosity wins friends. 2. Conversation generosity helps you learn more about people. Remember this, the average person would rather talk about himself than anything else in this world. When you give him the chance, he likes you for it. Conversation generosity is the easiest, simplest, and surest way there is to win a friend. The second benefit of conversation generosity, learning more about other people, is important too. As we said in Chapter 1, people are what we study in our Success Lab. The more we can learn from them, their thought processes, their strong and weak points, why they do what and as they do, the better equipped we are to influence them effectively in the way that we want. Let me illustrate. A large New York advertising agency, like all advertising agencies, specializes, of course, in telling the public why it should buy the products it advertises. But this agency does something else too. It requires its copywriters to spend 1 week each year behind counters so they can listen to what the people say about the products they promote. Listening provides the clues these copywriters need to write better, more effective ads. Many progressive businesses conduct so-called terminal interviews with employees who are leaving. The reason is not to sell the employees on staying with the company, but to find out why he is quitting. Then the company can bring about improvements in its employee relations. Listening pays off. Listening pays off for the salesman too. Often people think of a good salesman as a good talker or a fast talker. Sales managers, however, are not as impressed by a good talker as they are by a good listener, a fellow who can ask questions and get desired answers. Don't be a conversation hog. Listen, win friends, and learn. Courtesy, practiced in every relationship with another person, is the finest tranquilizer you can use. No commercial preparation is 1/10 as effective in relaxing you as doing little things for other people. Thinking right toward people removes frustrations and stress. When you boil it all down, the big cause of stress is negative feelings toward other people. So think positive toward people and discover how wonderful, really wonderful this world is. The real test for thinking right toward people comes when things don't go exactly the way we want. How do you think when you're passed up for a promotion? Or when you fail to win an office in a club you belong to? Or when you're criticized for the job you've done? Remember this: how you think when you lose determines how long it will be until you win. The answer for thinking right toward people when things don't go exactly our way comes from Benjamin Fairless, one of the century's most outstanding persons. Mr. Fairless, who rose from very modest circumstances to become chief executive of the United States Steel Corporation, said this, quoted in Life magazine, October 15, 1956. "It depends on how you look at things. For example, I never had a teacher I hated. Naturally, I was disciplined just like every other pupil, but I always figured it was my fault that the discipline was necessary. I have also liked every boss I ever had. I always tried to please him and do more than he expected if I possibly could, never less. I have had some disappointments, times when I greatly wanted a promotion and somebody else got it. But I never figured that I was the victim of office politics or prejudice or bad judgment on the boss's part. Instead of sulking or quitting in a huff, I reasoned things out. Obviously, the other fellow deserved the promotion more than I did. What could I do to make myself deserving of the next opportunity? At the same time, I never got angry with myself for losing, and never wasted any time berating myself. Remember Benjamin Fairless when things go wrong. Just do two things. 1. Ask yourself, what can I do to make myself more deserving of the next opportunity? 2. Don't waste time and energy being discouraged. Don't berate yourself. Plan to win next time. In a capsule, put these principles to work. 1. Make yourself lighter to lift. Be likable. Practice being the kind of person people like. This wins their support and puts fuel in your success-building program. 2. Take the initiative in building friendships. Introduce yourself to others at every opportunity. Make sure you get the other person's name straight, and make certain he gets your name straight too. Drop a personal note to your new friends you want to get to know better. 3. Accept human differences and limitations. Don't expect anyone to be perfect. Remember, the other person has a right to be different. And don't be a reformer. 4. Tune in to Channel P, the Good Thought Station. Find qualities to like and admire in a person, not things to dislike. And don't let others prejudice your thinking about a third person. Think positive thoughts toward people and get positive results. 5. Practice conversation generosity. Be like successful people. Encourage others to talk. Let the other person talk to you about his views, his opinions, his accomplishments. 6. Practice courtesy all the time. It makes other people feel better. It makes you feel better too. 7. Don't blame others when you receive a setback. Remember, how you think when you lose determines how long it will be until you win. Chapter 10. Get the action habit. Here's something leaders in every field agree on. There is a shortage of top-flight, expertly qualified persons to fill key positions. There really is, as the saying goes, plenty of room at the top. As one executive explained, there are many almost qualified people, but there is one success ingredient often missing. That is the ability to get things done, to get results. Every big job, whether it be operating a business, high-level selling, in science, the military, or the government, requires a man who thinks action. Principal executives looking for a key person demand answers to questions like, will he do the job? Will he follow through? Is he a self-starter? Can he get results, or is he just a talker? All these questions have one aim: to find out if the fellow is a man of action. Excellent ideas are not enough. An only fair idea acted upon and developed is 100% better than a terrific idea that dies because it isn't followed up. The great self-made merchant John Wanamaker often said, "Nothing comes merely by thinking about it." Think of it. Everything we have in this world, from satellites to skyscrapers to baby food, is just an idea acted upon. As you study people, both the successful and the just average, you find they fall into two classes. The successful are active. We'll call them activationists. The just average, the mediocre, the unsuccessful, are passive. We'll call them passivationists. We can discover a success principle by studying both groups. Mr. Activationist is a doer. He takes action, gets things done, follows through on ideas and plans. Mr. Passivationist is a don'ter. He postpones doing things until he has proved he shouldn't or can't do them, or until it's too late. The difference between Mr. Activationist and Mr. Passivationist shows through in countless little ways. Mr. Activationist plans a vacation. He takes it. Mr. Passivationist plans a vacation, but he postpones it until next year. Mr. A decides he should attend church regularly. He does. Mr. P thinks it's a good idea to go to church regularly too, but he finds ways to postpone acquiring this new habit. Mr. A feels that he should drop a note to someone he knows to congratulate him on some achievement. He writes the note. Under the same circumstances, Mr. P finds a good reason to put off writing the note, and it never gets written. The difference shows up in big things, too. Mr. A wants to go into business for himself. He does. Mr. P also wants to go into business for himself, but he discovers just in the nick of time a good reason why he had better not. Mr. A, age 40, decides he wants to take up a new line of work. He does. The same idea occurs to Mr. P, but he debates himself out of doing anything about it. The difference between Messrs. Activationist and Passivationist shows through in all forms of behavior. Mr. A gets the things done he wants done, and as byproducts he gains confidence, a feeling of inner security, self-reliance, and more income. Mr. P doesn't get the things done he wants done because he won't act. As byproducts, he loses confidence in himself, destroys his self-reliance, lives in mediocrity. Mr. Activationist does. Mr. Passivationist is going to do, but doesn't. Everyone wants to be an activationist. So, let's get the action habit. A lot of passivationists got that way because they insisted on waiting until everything was 100% favorable before they took action. Perfection is highly desirable, but nothing man-made or man-designed is or can be absolutely perfect. So to wait for the perfect set of conditions is to wait forever. Here are 3 case histories that show how 3 persons reacted to conditions. Case number 1. Why GN hasn't married. Mr. GN is now in his late 30s, is well-educated, works as an accountant, and lives alone in Chicago. GN's big desire is to get married. He wants love, companionship, a home, children, the works. GN has been close to marriage. Once he was only 1 day away. But each time he has been near marriage, he discovers something wrong with the girl he's about to marry. Just in time before I made an awful mistake. One instance stands out. 2 years ago, GN thought he finally had met just the right girl. She was attractive, pleasant, intelligent. But GN had to be absolutely sure that marriage was the right thing. As they were discussing marriage plans one evening, The future Mrs. GN made a few remarks that bothered GN. So, to make certain he was marrying the right girl, GN drew up a 4-page document of stipulations she was to agree to before they got married. The document, neatly typed and looking very legal, covered every segment of living GN could think of. There was one section on religion, what church they would go to, how often they would attend, how much they would donate. Another section covered children, how many and when. In detail, GN outlined the kind of friends they would have, his future wife's employment status, where they would live, how their income would be spent. To finish the document, GN devoted half a page to listing specific habits the girl must break or must acquire. This covered such habits as smoking, drinking, makeup, entertainment, and so on. When GN's prospective bride reviewed his ultimatum, she did what you would expect. She sent it back with a note saying, "The usual marriage clause, for better or for worse, is good enough for everyone else, and it's good enough for me. The whole thing is off." As GN was relating his experience to me, he said worriedly, "Now what was so wrong in writing out this agreement? After all, marriage is a big step. You can't be too careful." But GN was wrong. You can be too careful, too cautious, not only in planning a marriage, but in planning anything in the world where things get done. The standards can be too high. GN's approach to marriage was very much like his approach to his work, his savings, his friendships, everything else. The test of a successful person is not an ability to eliminate all problems before they arise, but to meet and work out difficulties when they do arise. We must be willing to make an intelligent compromise with perfection, lest we wait forever before taking action. It's still good advice to cross bridges as we come to them. Case number 2. Why JM lives in a new home. In every big decision, the mind battles with itself, to act or not to act, to do or not to do. Here's how one young fellow elected to act and reaped big rewards. JM's situation is similar to that of a million other young men. He is in his 20s, has a wife and child, and still has only a modest income. Mr. and Mrs. JM lived in a small apartment. Both wanted a new home. They wanted the advantage of more space, cleaner surroundings, a place for the youngster to play, and a chance to build up equity in their own property. But there was a hitch to buying a new home, the down payment. One day, as JM was writing next month's rent check, he became very disgusted with himself. He observed that the rent payment was as much as monthly payments on a new home. JM called his wife and said, "How would you like to buy a new home next week?" "What's got into you?" she asked. "Why make jokes? You know we can't. We haven't even got the money for the down payment." But JM was determined. There are hundreds of thousands of couples like us who are going to buy a new home someday, but only about half of them ever do. Something always comes up to stop them. We're going to buy a home. I don't know yet how we'll raise the down payment, but we will. Well, the next week they found a house they both liked, quite unpretentious but nice, for $1,200 down. Now, the obstacle was to find a way to raise $1,200. JM knew he couldn't borrow it through the usual channels, for this would encumber his credit so that he couldn't get a mortgage for the sale price. Where there's a will, there's always a way. Suddenly, JM got a brainstorm. Why not contact the builder and work out a private loan arrangement for $1,200? This JM did. At first, the builder was cold to the idea, but JM persisted. Finally, it was agreed. The builder would, in effect, advance JM the $1,200 to be repaid at $100 a month plus interest. Now, all JM had to do was to find $100 a month. Mr. and Mrs. JM sharpened their pencils and figured out a way to cut expenditures $25 a month. but that still left $75, which JM would have to raise each month. Then JM got another idea. The next morning, he went in to see his boss. He explained to his employer what he was doing. His boss was glad to learn that JM was going to buy a new home. Then JM said, "Look, Mr. T, to work this deal out, I've got to earn at least $75 more each month. Now I know," JM continued, "you'll give me a raise when you feel that I deserve it. What I want now is just a chance to earn more money. There are some things around here that could best be done on weekends. Will you make it possible for me to work then?" The employer was impressed with JM's sincerity and ambition. He proposed a way for JM to work 10 extra hours each weekend, and Mr. and Mrs. JM moved into their new home. 1. The resolution to take action ignited JM's mind to think of ways to accomplish his goal. 2. JM gained tremendously in new confidence. It will be much easier for him to take action in other major situations. 3. JM provided his wife and child the living standard they deserved. Had he waited, postponed buying the house until conditions were perfect, there is a real possibility they never would have owned a home of their own. Case number 3. CD wanted to start his own business, but Mr. CD represents another case of what happens to big ideas when one waits until conditions are perfect before taking action on those ideas. Shortly after World War II, CD got a job with the Customs Division of the U.S. Post Office Department. He liked his work, but after 5 years he became dissatisfied with the confinement, regular hours, low pay, and the seniority system with its relatively narrow chances for advancement. Then he got an idea. He had learned a great deal about what it takes to be a successful importer. Why not set himself up in the business of importing low-cost gift items and toys? CD knew many successful importers who didn't have his knowledge of the ins and outs of this business. It's been 10 years now since CD decided he wanted to go into business for himself. But today, he's still working for the customs office. Why? Well, every time CD was just about ready to cut loose on his own, something happened that stopped him from taking action. Lack of money, economic recession, new baby, need for temporary security, trade restrictions, and more excuses all served as reasons for waiting, for postponing. The real truth is that CD let himself develop into a passivationist. He wanted conditions to be perfect before he took action. Since conditions were never perfect, CD never took action. Here are 2 things to do to help you avoid the costly mistake of waiting until conditions are perfect before you act. 1. Expect future obstacles and difficulties. Every venture presents risks, problems, and uncertainties. Let's suppose you wanted to drive your car from Chicago to Los Angeles, but you insisted on waiting until you had absolute assurance that there would be no detours, no motor trouble, no bad weather, no drunken drivers, no risk of any kind. When would you start? Never. In planning your trip to Los Angeles, it makes sense to map your route, check your car, in other ways to eliminate as much risk as possible before you start. But you can't eliminate all risks. 2. Meet problems and obstacles as they arise. The test of a successful person is not the ability to eliminate all problems before he takes action, but rather the ability to find solutions to difficulties when he encounters them. In business, marriage, or in any activity, cross bridges when you come to them. We can't buy an insurance policy against all problems. Make up your mind to do something about your ideas. 5 or 6 years ago, a very capable professor told me of his plans for writing a book, a biography of a controversial personality of a few decades ago. His ideas were more than interesting. They were alive, fascinating. The professor knew what he wanted to say, and he had the skill and energy to say it. The project was destined to reward him with much inner satisfaction, prestige, and money. Last spring, I saw my friend again, and I innocently asked him whether the book was about finished. This was a blunder. It opened up an old wound. No, he hadn't written the book. He struggled with himself for a moment, as if he were debating with himself whether to explain why. Finally, he explained that he had been too busy. He had more responsibilities and just couldn't get to it. In reality, what the professor had done was to bury the idea deep in his mental graveyard. He let his mind grow negative thoughts. He visualized the tremendous work and sacrifices that would be involved. He saw all sorts of reasons why the project would fail. Ideas are important. Let's make no mistake about that. We must have ideas to create and improve anything. Success shuns the man who lacks ideas. But let's make no mistakes about this point either. Ideas in themselves are not enough. That idea for getting more business, for simplifying work procedures, is of value only when it is acted upon. Every day, thousands of people bury good ideas because they are afraid to act on them. And afterward, the ghosts of those ideas come back to haunt them. Put these two thoughts deep in your mind. First, give your ideas value by acting on them. Regardless of how good the idea, unless you do something with it, you gain nothing. Second, act on your ideas and gain mind tranquility. Someone once said that the saddest words of tongue or pen are these: "It might have been." Every day you hear someone saying something like, "Had I gone into business 7 years ago, I'd sure be sitting pretty now." Or, "I had a hunch it would work out like that. I wish I had done something about it." A good idea, if not acted upon, produces terrible psychological pain. But a good idea acted upon brings enormous mental satisfaction. Got a good idea? Then do something about it. Use action to cure fear and gain confidence. Here's something to remember. Action feeds and strengthens confidence. Inaction, in all forms, feeds fear. To fight fear, act. To increase fear, wait, put off, postpone. Once I heard a young paratrooper instructor explain, "The jump really isn't so bad. It's the waiting to jump that gets a fellow." On the trip to the jump site, I always try to make the time pass quickly for the men. It's happened more than once that a trainee thought too much about what may happen and panicked. If we can't get him to jump the next trip, he's through as a paratrooper. Instead of gaining confidence, the longer he postpones the jump, the more scared he gets. Waiting even makes the experts nervous. Time magazine reported that Edward R. Murrow, the nation's top newscaster, perspires and is on edge just before he telecasts. But once he's in action, fear disappears. Many veteran actors experience the same sensation. They agree that the only cure for stage fright is action. Getting right out there before the audience is the cure for dread, worry, fear. Action cures fear. One evening, we were visiting in a friend's home when their 5-year-old boy, who had been put to bed 30 minutes before, cried out. The youngster had been overstimulated by a science fiction film and was afraid the little green monsters were going to enter his room and kidnap him. I was intrigued by the way the boy's father relieved the lad's worry. He didn't say, "Don't worry, son, nothing is going to get you, go back to sleep." Instead, he took positive action. He made quite a show for the boy by inspecting the windows to be sure they were tight. Then he picked up one of the boy's plastic guns and put it on a table beside his bed and said, "Billy, here's a gun for you just in case." The little fellow had a look of complete relief. 4 minutes later, he was fast asleep. Many physicians give neutral, harmless medication to people who insist they've got to have something to make them sleep. To lots of folks, the act of swallowing a pill, even though, unknown to them, the pill has no medication, makes them feel better. It's perfectly natural to experience fear in one of many forms, but the usual methods of combating it simply don't work. I've been with many salesmen who tried to cure fear, which creeps up on even the most experienced of them at times, by going around the block a few times or drinking extra coffee. But these things don't get results. The way to combat that kind of fear, yes, any kind of fear, is action. Dread making a certain phone call? Make it and dread disappears. Put it off, and it will get harder and harder to make. Dread going to a doctor for a checkup? Go and your worry vanishes. Chances are nothing serious is wrong with you, and if there is, you know where you stand. Put off that checkup, and you feed your fear until it may grow so strong that you actually are sick. Dread discussing a problem with your superior? Discuss it and discover how those worries are conquered. Build confidence. Destroy fear through action. Start your mental engine mechanically. An aspiring young writer who wasn't experiencing success made this confession. My trouble is, whole days and weeks pass that I can't get a thing written. You see, he remarked, writing is creative. You've got to be inspired. Your spirit must move you. True, writing is creative, but here's how another creative man, also a writer, explained his secret for producing quantities of successful material. I use a mind force technique, he began. I've got deadlines to meet, and I can't wait for my spirit to move me. I've got to move my spirit. Here's how my method works. I make myself sit down at my desk. Then I pick up a pencil and go through mechanical motions of writing. I put down anything. I doodle, I get my fingers and arm in motion, and sooner or later, without my being conscious of it, my mind gets on the right track. Sometimes, of course, I get ideas out of the blue when I'm not trying to write, he went on. But these are just bonuses. Most of the good ideas come from just getting to work. Action must precede action. That's a law of nature. Nothing starts itself, not even the dozens of mechanical gadgets we use daily. Your home is heated automatically, but you must select, take action, the temperature you want. Your car shifts gears automatically only after you have set the right lever. The same principle applies to mind action. You get your mind in gear to make it produce for you. A young branch sales manager for a door-to-door sales organization explained how he trained his sales force the mechanical way to start each day earlier and more successfully. There's a tremendous resistance to the door-to-door salesman, as anyone who has ever sold house to house knows, he commented. And it's hard, even for the veteran salesman, to make that first call in the morning. He knows the odds are pretty good that he'll get some pretty rough treatment before the day is over. So it's natural for him to put off getting started in the morning. He'll drink a couple of extra cups of coffee, maybe cruise around the neighborhood a while, or do a dozen little things to postpone that first call. I train each new man this way. I explain to him that the only way to start is to start. Don't deliberate. Don't postpone getting started. Do this. Just park your car, get your sample case, walk to the door, ring the bell, smile, say good morning, and make your presentation, all mechanically, without a lot of conscious thought. Start making calls this way and you break the ice. By the second or third call, your mind is sharp and your presentations become effective. A humorist once said the most difficult problem in life was getting out of a warm bed into a cold room. And he had a point. The longer you lie there and think how unpleasant it will be to get up, the more difficult it becomes. Even in such a simple operation as this, mechanical action, Just throwing off the covers and putting your feet on the floor defeats dread. The point is clear. People who get things done in this world don't wait for the spirit to move them. They move the spirit. Try these 2 exercises. 1. Use the mechanical way to accomplish simple but sometimes unpleasant business and household chores. Rather than think about the unpleasant features of the task, jump right in and get going without a lot of deliberation. Perhaps the most unpleasant household task to most women is washing dishes. My mother is no exception. But she has mastered a mechanical approach to dispensing with this task quickly, so she can return to things she likes to do. As she leaves the table, she always mechanically picks up several dishes, and without thinking about the task ahead, just gets started. In just a few minutes, she is through. Doesn't this beat stacking dishes and dreading the unpleasant inevitable? Do this today. Pick the one thing you like to do least. Then, without letting yourself deliberate on or dread the task, do it. That's the most efficient way to handle chores. 2. Next, use the mechanical way to create ideas, map out plans, solve problems, and do other work that requires top mental performance. Rather than wait for the spirit to move you, sit down and move your spirit. Here's a special technique guaranteed to help you. Use a pencil and paper. A simple pencil is the greatest concentration tool money can buy. If I had to choose between an ultra-fancy, deeply carpeted, beautifully decorated soundproof office and a pencil and paper, I'd choose the pencil and paper every time. With a pencil and paper, you can tie your mind to a problem. When you write a thought on paper, your full attention is automatically focused on that thought. That's because the mind is not designed to think one thought and write another at the same time. When you write on paper, you write on your mind too. Tests prove conclusively that you remember something much longer and much more exactly if you write the thought on paper. And once you master the pencil and paper technique for concentration, you can think in noisy or other distracting situations. When you want to think, start writing or doodling or diagramming. It's an excellent way to move your spirit. Now is the magic word of success. Tomorrow, next week, later, sometime, someday, often as not are synonyms for the failure word, never. Lots of good dreams never come true because we say, "I'll start someday," when we should say, "I'll start now, right now." Take one example, saving money. Just about everybody agrees that saving money is a good idea. But just because it's a good idea doesn't mean many folks follow an organized savings and investment program. Many people have intentions to save, but only relatively few act on these intentions. Here's how one young couple got into gear with a regular wealth accumulation program. Bill's take-home income was $1,000 a month, but he and his wife Janet spent $1,000 each month too. Both wanted to save, but there were always reasons why they felt they couldn't begin. For years, they had promised themselves, "We'll start when we get a raise, when we've caught up with our installments, when we're over the hump, next month, next year." Finally, Janet got disgusted with their failure to save. She said to Bill, "Look, do we want to save or don't we?" He replied, "Of course we do. But you know as well as I, we can't put aside anything now." But for once, Janet was in a do-or-die mood. "We've been telling ourselves for years we're going to start a savings program. We don't save because we think we can't. Now let's start thinking we can. I saw an ad today that shows if we'd save just $100 a month, in 15 years, we'd have $18,000 plus $6,600 accumulated interest." The ad also said it's easier to spend what's left over after savings than it is to save what's left over after spending. If you're game, Let's start with 10% of your pay and let's save off the top. We may eat crackers and milk before the month's up, but if we have to, we will. Bill and Janet were cramped for a few months, but soon they were adjusted to their new budget. Now they feel it's just as much fun to spend money on savings as it is to spend it on something else. Want to write a note to a friend? Do it now. Got an idea you think would help your business? Present it now. Live the advice of Benjamin Franklin. Don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today. Remember, thinking in terms of now gets things accomplished. But thinking in terms of someday or sometime usually means failure. One day, I stopped in to see an old business friend. She had just returned from a conference with several of her executives. The moment I looked at her, I could tell there was something she wanted to get off her chest. She had the look of a woman who had suffered real disappointment. "You know," she said, "I called that conference this morning because I wanted some help on a proposed policy change. But what kind of help did I get? I had 6 men in there, and only one of them had anything to contribute. 2 others talked, but what they said was just an echo of what I had said. It was like talking with a bunch of vegetables. I confess it's hard for me to find out what those fellows think." "Really," she went on, "you'd think those fellows would speak up and let me know what they think. After all, it directly affects each of them." My friend didn't get help in the conference. But had you roamed the hall after the meeting broke up, you'd have heard her junior associates making remarks like, "I felt like saying, why didn't someone suggest, I don't think, we ought to go ahead." So, often the vegetables, those who have nothing to say in the conference room, are full of talk after the meeting, when what they've got to say won't make any difference. They're suddenly full of life when it's too late. Business executives want comment. The fellow who hides his light under a bushel hurts himself. Get the speak-up habit. Each time you speak up, you strengthen yourself. Come forward with your constructive ideas. We all know how many college students prepare their assignments. With fine intentions, Joe College sets aside a whole evening for some concentrated study. Here is a general pattern of how, too often, the evening is spent. Joe's ready to begin studying at 7 p.m., but his dinner seems just a bit heavy, so he decides to get in a little TV. A little turns out to be an hour's worth, since the program was pretty good. At 8 p.m., he sits down at his desk, but gets right back up because he just remembered he promised to call his girl. This shoots another 40 minutes. He hadn't talked to her all day. An incoming call takes another 20 minutes. On his way back to his desk, Joe is drawn into a ping-pong game. Another hour gone. The ping-pong makes him feel sweaty, so he takes a shower. Next, he needs a snack. The combined effect of the ping-pong and the shower have made him hungry. And so the evening planned with good intentions drifts away. Finally, at 1 a.m., he opens the book, but he's too sleepy to absorb the subject. Finally, he surrenders completely. Next morning, he tells the professor, "I hope you give me a break. I studied till 2 a.m. for this exam." Joe College didn't get into action because he spent too much time getting ready to get into action. And Joe College isn't alone in being a victim of overpreparedness. Joe Salesman, Joe Executive, Joe Professional Worker, Josephine Housewife. They all often try to build strength and get ready with office chats, coffee breaks, sharpening pencils, reading, personal business, getting the desk cleared off, TV, and dozens of other little escape devices. But there's a way to break this habit. Tell yourself, I'm in condition right now to begin. I can't gain a thing by putting it off. I'll use the get ready time and energy to get going instead. What we want more than anything else in our business, an executive in a machine tool company said in an address to a group of sales executives, is more people who get sound ideas and then push them through. There's not one job in our production and marketing setup that can't be done better, a lot better. I don't want to infer that we're not doing a good job now. We are. But like all progressive companies, we need new products, new markets, new and more efficient ways of doing things. We depend on people with initiative. They're the ball carriers on our team. Initiative is a special kind of action. It's doing something worthwhile without being told to do it. The person with initiative has a standing invitation to join the high-income brackets in every business and profession. The director of marketing research in a medium-sized drug manufacturing firm told me how he got to be a director of marketing research. It's a good lesson in the power of initiative. 5 years ago, I got an idea, he told me. I was working then as a sort of missionary salesman, calling on wholesalers. I discovered that one thing we lacked was facts about the consumers we wanted to buy our drug line. I talked about the need for market research to everyone here. At first I got only deaf ears because management couldn't see the need for it. I was pretty much obsessed with the idea of marketing research in our company, so I sort of took the bull by the horns. I asked and got permission to prepare a monthly report on facts of drug marketing. I collected information from every source I could find. I kept on with this, and pretty soon management and the other salesmen found themselves really interested in what I was doing. Just 1 year after I started crusading for research, I was relieved of my regular duties and asked to concentrate on developing my ideas. The rest, he continued, was just natural development. Now I've got 2 assistants, a secretary, and about 3 times the yearly income I had 5 years ago. Here are 2 special exercises for developing the initiative habit. 1. Be a crusader. When you see something that you believe ought to be done, pick up the ball and run. A new subdivision not far from where I live was about 2/3 built when expansion came almost to a standstill. A few families with a don't-care attitude had moved in. This prompted several of the finest families in the area to sell their homes at a loss and move on. As so often happens, the do-care families caught the don't-care attitude from their don't-care neighbors. Everyone, that is, except Harry L. Harry, did care, and he decided to crusade for a fine neighborhood. Harry began by calling together some friends. He pointed out that this subdivision had tremendous potential, but that something must be done now or the area would soon be a strictly second-class neighborhood. Harry's enthusiasm and initiative quickly won support. Soon there were clean-up-the-vacant lots projects. Garden clubs were organized. A massive tree planting project was started. A playground was built for the youngsters. A community swimming pool was constructed. The don't-care families became eager supporters. The whole subdivision took on new life and new sparkle. It's really a pleasure now to drive through that community. It shows what a crusader can do. Do you feel your business should develop a new department, make a new product, or in some other way expand? Well then, crusade for it. Feel your church needs a new building? Crusade for it. Would you like your children's school to have better equipment? Crusade and get it for them. And you can bank on this. While crusades may start out as one-man crusades, if the idea behind the enterprise is good, soon you'll have lots of support. Be an activationist and crusade. 2. Be a volunteer. Each of us has been in situations in which we wanted to volunteer for some activity but didn't. Why? Because of fear. Not fear that we couldn't accomplish the task, but rather fear of what our associates would say. The fear of being laughed at, of being called an eager beaver, of being accused of bucking for a raise holds many people back. It's natural to want to belong, to be accepted, to have group approval. But ask yourself, which group do I want to have accept me? The group that laughs because it is secretly jealous, or the group that is making progress by doing things? The right choice is obvious. The volunteer stands out. He receives special attention. Most important of all, he gives himself an opportunity to show he has special ability and ambition by volunteering. By all means, volunteer for those special assignments. Think about the leaders you know in business, the military, your community. Do they fit the description of activationist, or would you say they are passivationists? 10 times out of 10, they're activationists, people who do things. The fellow who stands on the sidelines, who holds off, who is passive, does not lead. But the doer, the fellow who thinks action, finds others want to follow him. People place confidence in the fellow who acts. They naturally assume he knows what he is doing. I've never heard anyone complimented and praised because he doesn't disturb anyone, he doesn't take action, or he waits until he's told what to do. Have you? Grow the action habit. Practice these key points. 1. Be an activationist. Be someone who does things. Be a doer, not a don'ter. 2. Don't wait until conditions are perfect. They never will be. Expect future obstacles and difficulties and solve them as they arise. 3. Remember, ideas alone won't bring success. Ideas have value only when you act upon them. 4. Use action to cure fear and gain confidence. Do what you fear, and fear disappears. Just try it and see. 5. Start your mental engine mechanically. Don't wait for the spirit to move you. Take action, dig in, and you move the spirit. 6. Think in terms of now. Tomorrow, next week, later, and similar words often are synonymous with the failure word never. Be an I'm starting right now kind of person. 7. Get down to business, pronto. Don't waste time getting ready to act. Start acting instead. 8. Seize the initiative. Be a crusader. Pick up the ball and run. Be a volunteer. Show that you have ability and ambition to do. Get in gear and go. Chapter 11. How to turn defeat into victory. Social workers and others who work on Skid Row find many differences in age, religious faith, education, and background among the tragic souls who have dropped into America's gutters. Some of these citizens are surprisingly young. Others are old. A sprinkling are college graduates. A few have essentially no formal education. Some are married, others are not. But the people on Skid Row do have something in common. Each one is defeated, whipped, beaten. Each one has encountered situations that conquered him. Each is eager, even anxious, to tell you about the situation that wrecked him, about his own private Waterloo. These situations cover the waterfront of human experience, from my wife ran out on me, to I lost everything I had and had no place else to go, to I did a couple of things that made me a social outcast, so I came down here. When we move up from Skid Row into the dominion of Mr. and Mrs. Average American, we see obvious differences in living habits. But again, we discover that Mr. Mediocre gives essentially the same reasons to explain his mediocrity as Mr. Skid Row gave to explain his complete collapse. Inside, Mr. Mediocre feels defeated. He has unhealed wounds suffered in situations that beat him. Now he is super cautious. He plods along, ducking the thrill of living victoriously, discontented with himself. He feels beaten, but tries hard to endure the sentence of mediocrity that fate has handed him. He, too, has surrendered to defeat, but in a reasonably clean, socially accepted way. Now, when we climb upstairs into the uncrowded world of success, we again discover people from every possible background. Corporate executives, leading ministers, government officials, top men in every field, we discover come from poor homes, rich homes, broken homes, cotton patches, cornfields, and slums. These people, who lead every branch of our society, have experienced every tough situation you can describe. It is possible to match every Mr. Skid Row with a Mr. Mediocre and a Mr. Success on every score. Age, intelligence, background, nationality, you name it, with one exception. The one thing you can't match them on is their response to defeat. When the fellow we call Mr. Skid Row got knocked down, he failed to get up again. He just lay there, splattered out. Mr. Mediocre got up to his knees, but he crawled away, and when out of sight, ran in the opposite direction, so he'd be sure never to take a beating again. But Mr. Success reacted differently when he got knocked down. He bounced up, learned a lesson, forgot the beating, and moved upward. One of my closest friends is an exceptionally successful management consultant. When you walk into his office, you feel that you are really uptown. The fine furniture, the carpeting, the busy people, the important clients, all tell you his company is prosperous. A cynic might say, "It must have taken a real con man to put across an operation like this." But the cynic would be wrong. It didn't take a con man. And it didn't take a brilliant man or a wealthy man or a lucky man. All, and I hesitate to use the word all because all means so much sometimes, all it took was a persistent man who never thought he was defeated. Behind this prosperous and respected company is the story of a man fighting, battling his way upward, losing 10 years' savings in his first 6 months in business, living in his office several months because he lacked money to pay rent on an apartment, turning down numerous good jobs because he wanted more to stay with his idea and make it work, hearing prospects for his service say no 100 times as often as they said yes. During the 7 unbelievably hard years it took him to succeed, I never heard my friend complain once. He'd explain, "Dave, I'm learning. This is competitive business, and because it's intangible, it's hard to sell, but I'm learning how." And he did. Once, I told my friend that this experience must be taking a lot out of him, but he replied, "No, it's not taking something out of me. It's putting something into me instead." Check the lives of the people in Who's Who in America, and you'll find that those who have succeeded in a major way have been pounded by losing situations. Each person in this elite core of successful men has encountered opposition, discouragement, setbacks, personal misfortune. Read the biographies and autobiographies of great people, and again you discover that each of these people could have surrendered to setbacks many times. Or do this. Learn the background of the president of your company or the mayor of your city, or select any person you consider a real success. When you probe, you'll discover the individual has overcome big, real obstacles. It is not possible to win high-level success without meeting opposition, hardship, and setback. But it is possible to use setbacks to propel you forward. Let's see how. I saw some commercial airline statistics recently showing that there is only 1 fatality per 10 billion miles flown. Air travel is a magnificently safe way to go these days. Unfortunately, air accidents still occur. But when they do, the Civil Aviation Administration is on the scene quickly to find out what caused the crash. Fragments of metal are picked up from miles around and pieced together. A variety of experts reconstruct what probably happened. Witnesses and survivors are interviewed. The investigation goes on for weeks, months, until the question, what caused this crash, is answered. Once the CAA has the answer, immediate steps are taken to prevent a similar accident from happening again. If the crash was caused by a structural defect, other planes of that type must have that defect corrected. Or if certain instruments are found faulty, corrections must be made. Literally hundreds of safety devices on modern aircraft have resulted from CAA investigations. The CAA studies setbacks to pave the way to safer air travel, and it's obvious that their efforts pay off. Doctors use setbacks to pave the way to better health and longer life. Often, when a patient dies for an uncertain reason, doctors perform a post-mortem to find out why. In this way, they learn more about the functioning of the human body, and lives of other people are saved. A sales executive friend of mine devotes one entire sales meeting a month to helping his salesmen discover why they lost important sales. The lost sale is reconstructed and carefully examined. In this way, the salesman learns how to avoid losing similar sales in the future. The football coach who wins more games than he loses goes over the details of each game with his team to point out their mistakes. Some coaches have movies made of each game so the team can literally see its bad moves. The purpose? To play the next game better. CAA officials, successful sales executives, physicians, football coaches, and professionals in every field follow this success principle. Salvage something from every setback. When a setback hits us personally, our first impulse is often to become so emotionally upset that we fail to learn the lesson. Professors know that a student's reaction to a failing grade provides a clue to his success potential. When I was a professor at Wayne State University in Detroit some years ago, I had no choice but to turn in a failing grade for a graduating senior. This was a real blow to the student. He had already made graduation plans, and canceling was embarrassing. He was left with two alternatives: retake and pass the course and receive his degree at a later graduation, or quit school without earning a degree. I expected that the student would be disappointed, perhaps even somewhat belligerent, when he learned of his setback. I was right. After I explained that his work was far below passing standards, the student admitted that he hadn't put forth a serious effort in the course. But, he continued, my past record is at least average. Can't you consider that? I pointed out that I could not, because we measure performance one course at a time. I added that rigid academic codes prohibited changing grades for any reason other than an honest mistake on the part of the professor. Then the student, realizing that all avenues toward a grade change were closed, became quite angry. Professor, he said, I could name 50 people in this city who've succeeded in a big way without taking this course or even knowing about it. What's so blasted important about this course? Why should a few bad marks in one course keep me from getting my degree? Thank God, he added, they don't look at things on the outside like you professors do. After that remark, I paused for about 45 seconds. I've learned that when you've been sniped at, one fine way to prevent a war of words is to take a long pause before answering. Then I said to my student friend, much of what you say is true. There are many, many highly successful people who know absolutely nothing about the subject matter in this course. And it is possible for you to win success without this knowledge. In the total scheme of life, this course content won't make or break you. But your attitude toward this course may. What do you mean by that? He asked. Just this, I answered. Outside, they grade you just as we grade you. What counts there, just as what counts here, is doing the job. Outside, they won't promote you or pay you more for doing second-class work. I paused again to make certain the point got through. Then I said, may I make a suggestion? You're highly disappointed now. I can appreciate how you feel. And I don't think any less of you if you're a little sore at me. But look at this experience positively. There's a tremendously important lesson here. If you don't produce, you don't get where you want to go. Learn this lesson, and 5 years from now you'll regard it as one of the most profitable lessons you learned in all the time you invested here. I was glad when I learned a few days later that this student had re-enrolled for the course. This time he passed with flying colors. Afterward, he made a special call to see me to let me know how much he had appreciated our earlier discussion. "I learned something from flunking your course the first time," he said. "It may sound odd, but you know, Professor, now I'm glad I did not pass the first time." We can turn setbacks into victories. Find the lesson, apply it, and then look back on defeat and smile. Moviegoers will never forget the great Lionel Barrymore. In 1936, Mr. Barrymore broke his hip. The fracture never healed. Most people thought Mr. Barrymore was finished, but not Mr. Barrymore. He used the setback to pave the way to even greater acting success. For the next 18 years, despite pain that never abated, he played dozens of successful roles in a wheelchair. On March 15, 1945, W. Colvin Williams was walking behind a tank in France. The tank hit a mine, exploded, and permanently blinded Mr. Williams. But this didn't stop Mr. Williams from pursuing his goal to be a minister and counselor. When he was graduated from college, and with honors too, Mr. Williams said he thought his blindness will actually be an asset in my career. "I can never judge by appearances. Therefore, I can always give a person a second chance. My blindness keeps me from cutting myself off from a person because of the way he looks. I want to be the kind of person to whom anyone can come and feel secure to express himself." Isn't that a magnificent living example of cruel, bitter defeat being turned into victory? Defeat is only a state of mind, and nothing more. One of my friends, who is a substantial and successful investor in the stock market, carefully appraises each investment decision in the light of his past experiences. One time he told me, "When I first started investing 15 years ago, I really got singed a few times. Like most amateurs, I wanted to get rich quick. Instead, I got broke quick. But that didn't stop me. I knew the basic strengths of the economy, and that over the long pull, well-selected stocks are about the best investment anybody can make. So I just regarded those first bad investments as part of the cost of my education," he laughed. On the other hand, I know a number of people who, having made an unwise investment or two, are strictly anti-securities. Rather than analyze their mistakes and join in a good thing, they reach the completely false conclusion that investing in common stocks is just a form of gambling, and sooner or later everybody loses. Decide right now to salvage something from every setback. Next time things seem to go wrong on the job or at home, calm down and find out what caused the trouble. This is the way to avoid making the same error twice. Being licked is valuable, if we learn from it. We human beings are curious creatures. We're quick to accept full credit for our victories. When we win, we want the world to know about it. It's natural to want others to look at you and say, "There goes the fellow who did such and such." But human beings are equally quick to blame someone else for each setback. It's natural for salesmen to blame customers when sales are lost. It's natural for executives to blame employees or other executives when things get out of gear. It's natural for husbands to blame wives and wives to blame husbands for quarrels and family problems. It is true that in this complex world, others may trip us. But it is also true that more often than not, we trip ourselves. We lose because of personal inadequacy, some personal mistake. Condition yourself for success this way. Remind yourself that you want to be as nearly perfect as is humanly possible. Be objective. Put yourself in a glass tube and look at yourself as a disinterested third party would look at the situation. See if you have a weakness that you've never noticed before. If you have, take action to correct it. Many people become so accustomed to themselves that they fail to see ways for improvement. The great Metropolitan Opera star Risa Stevens said in Reader's Digest, July 1955, that at the unhappiest moment of her life, she received the best advice she's ever had. Early in her career, Miss Stevens lost the Metropolitan Opera Auditions of the Air. After losing, Miss Stevens was bitter. "I longed to hear," she said, "that my voice was really better than the other girls, that the verdict was grossly unfair, that I had just lacked the right connections to win." But Miss Stevens's teacher didn't coddle her. Instead, she said to Miss Stevens, "My dear, have the courage to face your faults." Much as I wanted to fall back on self-pity, continued Miss Stevens, those words, kept coming back to me. That night they woke me. I couldn't sleep until I faced my shortcomings. Lying there in the dark, I asked myself, why did I fail? How can I win next time? And I admitted to myself that my voice range was not as good as it had to be, that I had to perfect my languages, that I must learn more roles. Miss Stevens went on to say how facing her faults not only helped her to succeed on stage, but also helped her win more friends and develop a more pleasing personality. Being self-critical is constructive. It helps you to build the personal strength and efficiency needed for success. Blaming others is destructive. You gain absolutely nothing from proving that someone else is wrong. Be constructively self-critical. Don't run away from inadequacies. Be like the real professionals. They seek out their faults and weaknesses, then correct them. That's what makes them professionals. Don't, of course, try to find your faults so you can say to yourself, "Here's another reason I'm a loser." Instead, view your mistakes as, "Here's another way to make me a bigger winner." The great Orville Hubbard once said, "A failure is a man who has blundered but is not able to cash in on the experience." Often we blame luck for our setbacks. We say, "Well, that's the way the ball bounces," and let it go at that. But stop and think. Balls don't bounce in certain ways for uncertain reasons. The bounce of a ball is determined by three things: the ball, the way it is thrown, and the surface it strikes. Definite physical laws explain the bounce of a ball, not luck. Suppose the CAA were to issue a report saying, "We're sorry the crash occurred, but folks, that's just the way the ball bounces." You'd say it's time to get a new CAA. Or suppose a doctor explained to a relative, "I'm awfully sorry, I don't know what happened. It's just one of those things." You'd switch doctors when you or another relative became ill. The "that's the way the ball bounces" approach teaches us nothing. We're no better prepared to avoid a duplication of the mistake the next time we face a similar situation. The football coach who takes Saturday's loss with, "Well, boys, that's the way the ball bounces," isn't helping his team avoid the same mistakes the next Saturday. Orville Hubbard, mayor of Dearborn, Michigan for 17 consecutive years, is one of the nation's most colorful and respected urban administrators. For 10 years prior to becoming mayor of Dearborn, Mr. Hubbard could have used the bad luck excuse and stepped out of politics. Before becoming a perennial winner, Orville Hubbard was unlucky 3 times in trying to get the nomination for mayor. 3 times he tried to get the nomination for state senator, but failed. Once he was beaten in a race for a congressional nomination. But Orville Hubbard studied these setbacks. He regarded them as part of his political education. And today, he is one of the sharpest, most unbeatable politicians in local government. Instead of blaming luck, research those setbacks. If you lose, learn. Lots of folks go through life explaining their mediocrity with hard luck, tough luck, sour luck, bad luck. These people are still like children, immature, searching for sympathy. Without realizing it, they fail to see opportunities to grow bigger, stronger, more self-reliant. Stop blaming luck. Blaming luck never got anyone where he wanted to go. A friend, who is a literary consultant, writer, and critic, chatted with me recently about what it takes to be a successful writer. A lot of would-be writers, he explained, simply aren't serious about wanting to write. They try for a little while, but give it up when they discover there is real work involved. I haven't much patience with these people because they're looking for a shortcut, and there just isn't one. But, he went on, I don't want to imply that pure persistence is enough. The plain truth is, often it isn't. Just now, I'm working with a fellow who's written 62 short fiction pieces but hasn't sold one. Obviously, he is persistent in his goal to become a writer. But this fellow's problem is that he uses the same basic approach in everything he writes. He's developed a hard format for his stories. He has never experimented with his material, his plots and characters, and perhaps even style. What I'm trying to do now is to get this client to try some new approaches and some new techniques. He has ability, and if he'll do some experimenting, I'm sure he'll sell much of what he writes. But until he does, he'll just go on receiving one rejection slip after another. The advice of the literary consultant is good. We must have persistence. But persistence is only one of the ingredients of victory. We can try and try and try and try and try again and still fail, unless we combine persistence with experimentation. Edison is credited with being one of America's most persistent scientists. It's reported that he conducted thousands of experiments before he invented the electric light bulb. But note, Edison conducted experiments. He persisted in his goal to develop a light bulb. But he made that persistence pay off by blending it with experimentation. Persisting in one way is not a guarantee of victory, but persistence blended with experimentation does guarantee success. Recently, I noticed an article about the continuous search for oil. It said that oil companies study the rock formations carefully before they drill a well. Yet, despite their scientific analysis, 7 out of 8 wells drilled turn out to be dry holes. Oil companies are persistent in their search for oil, not by digging one hole to ridiculous depths, but rather by experimenting with a new well when good judgment says the first well won't produce. Many ambitious people go through life with admirable persistence and show of ambition, but they fail to succeed because they don't experiment with new approaches. Stay with your goal. Don't waver an inch from it. But don't beat your head against a wall. If you aren't getting results, try a new approach. People who have bulldog persistence, who can grab something and not let go, have an essential success quality. Here are 2 suggestions for developing greater power to experiment, the ingredient that, when blended with persistence, gets results. 1. Tell yourself there is a way. All thoughts are magnetic. As soon as you tell yourself, I'm beaten, there's no way to conquer this problem, negative thoughts are attracted, and each of these helps convince you that you are right, that you are whipped. Believe instead, there is a way to solve this problem, and positive thoughts rush into your mind to help you find a solution. It's believing there is a way that is important. Marriage counselors report no success in saving marriages until one, and preferably both partners, see that it is possible to win back happiness. Psychologists and social workers say an alcoholic is doomed to alcoholism until he believes he can beat his thirst. This year, thousands of new businesses are being formed. 5 years from now, only a small portion will be still in operation. Most of those who fail will say, "Competition was just too much. We had no choice but to quit." The real problem is that when most people hit the tar, things are rough barrier, they think only defeat, and so they are defeated. When you believe there is a way, you automatically convert negative energy, let's quit, let's go back, into positive energy, let's keep going, let's move ahead. A problem, a difficulty, becomes unsolvable only when you think it is unsolvable. Attract solutions by believing solutions are possible. Refuse, simply refuse to even let yourself say or think that it's impossible. 2. Back off and start afresh. Often we stay so close to a problem for so long that we can't see new solutions or new approaches. An engineer friend was retained a few weeks ago to design a distinctly new aluminum structure. In fact, nothing even resembling it had even been developed or designed before. I saw him just a few days ago, and I asked him how his new building was coming along. "Not too well," he replied. "I guess I haven't spent enough time with my garden this summer. When I live with tough design problems for a long stretch, I've got to get away and let some new ideas soak in." "You'd be surprised," he continued, "to know how many engineering ideas come to me when I'm just sitting beside a tree holding a water hose on the grass." President Eisenhower once was asked at a news conference why he took so many weekend vacations. His answer is good advice for everybody who wants to maximize his creative ability. Mr. Eisenhower said, "I do not believe that any individual, whether he is running General Motors or the United States of America, can do the best job just by sitting at a desk and putting his face in a bunch of papers. Actually, the president ought to be trying to keep his mind free of inconsequential details and doing his own thinking on the basic principles and factors, so that he can make clear and better judgments." A former business associate of mine takes a 72-hour out-of-town vacation with his wife once each month. He found this backing off and starting afresh increased his mental efficiency, thereby making him more valuable to his clients. When you hit a snag, don't throw up the whole project. Instead, back off, get mentally refreshed. Try something as simple as playing some music or taking a walk or a short nap. Then, when you tackle it again, the solution often comes almost before you know it. Seeing the good side pays off in big situations too. A young man told me how he concentrated on seeing the good side when he lost his job. He explained it this way. "I was working for a large credit reporting company. One day I was given short notice to leave. There was an economy wave on, and they dismissed the employees who were least valuable to the company. The job didn't pay too well, but by the standards I grew up with, it was pretty good. I really felt terrible for a few hours, but then I decided to look at being bounced as a blessing in disguise. I really didn't like the job much, and had I stayed there, I'd never have gone far. Now I had a chance to find something I really liked to do. It wasn't long until I found a job that I liked a lot better that paid more money too. Being fired from that credit company was the best thing that ever happened to me." Remember, you see in any situation what you expect to see. See the good side and conquer defeat. All things do work together for good if you'll just develop clear vision. In quick review, the difference between success and failure is found in one's attitudes towards setbacks, handicaps, discouragements, and other disappointing situations. 5 guideposts to help you turn defeat into victory are: 1. Study setbacks to pave your way to success. When you lose, learn, and then go on to win next time. 2. Have the courage to be your own constructive critic. Seek out your faults and weaknesses, and then correct them. This makes you a professional. 3. Stop blaming luck. Research every setback. Find out what went wrong. Remember, blaming luck never got anyone where he wanted to go. 4. Blend persistence with experimentation. Stay with your goal, but don't beat your head against a stone wall. Try new approaches. Experiment. 5. Remember, there is a good side in every situation. Find it, see the good side, and whip discouragement. Chapter 12. Use goals to help you grow. Every bit of human progress, our inventions, big and little, our medical discoveries, our engineering triumphs, our business successes, were first visualized before they became realities. Baby moons circle the Earth not because of accidental discoveries, but because scientists set conquer space as a goal. A goal is an objective, a purpose. A goal is more than a dream. It's a dream being acted upon. A goal is more than a hazy, "Oh, I wish I could." A goal is a clear, "This is what I'm working toward." Nothing happens, no forward steps are taken until a goal is established. Without goals, individuals just wander through life. They stumble along, never knowing where they are going, so they never get anywhere. Goals are as essential to success as air is to life. No one ever stumbles into success without a goal. No one ever lives without air. Get a clear fix on where you want to go. Dave Mahoney rose from a low-paying job in the mailroom of an advertising agency to an agency vice president at 27 and president of the Good Humor Company at 33. This is what he says about goals. The important thing is not where you were or where you are, but where you want to get. A progressive corporation plans company goals 10 to 15 years ahead. Executives who manage leading businesses must ask, where do we want our company to be 10 years from now? Then they gauge their efforts accordingly. New plant capacity is built not for today's needs, but rather for needs 5 to 10 years in the future. Research is undertaken to develop products that won't appear for a decade or longer. The modern corporation does not leave its future to chance, should you? Each of us can learn a precious lesson from the forward-looking business. We can and should plan at least 10 years ahead. You must form an image now of the person you want to be 10 years from now, if you are to become that image. This is a critical thought. Just as the business that neglects to plan ahead will be just another business, if it even survives, the individual who fails to set long-range goals will most certainly be just another person lost in life's shuffle. Without goals, we cannot grow. Let me share with you an example of why we must have long-run goals to achieve real success. Just last week, a young man, let me call him FB, came to me with a career problem. FB looked well-mannered and intelligent. He was single and had finished college 4 years ago. We talked for a while about what he was doing now, his education, his aptitudes, and general background. Then I said to him, "You came to see me for help on making a job change. What kind of job are you looking for?" "Well," he said, "that's what I came to see you about. I don't know what I want to do." His problem, of course, was a very common one. But I realized that just to arrange for the young man to have interviews with several possible employers would not help him. Trial and error is a pretty poor way to select a career. With dozens of career possibilities, the odds of stumbling into the right choice are several dozen to one. I knew I had to help FB see that before he starts going someplace career-wise, he's got to know where that someplace is. So I said, "Let's look at your career plan from this angle. Will you describe for me your image of yourself 10 years from now?" FB, obviously studying the question, finally said, "Well, I guess I want what just about everyone else wants, a good job that pays well and a nice home. Really though," he continued, "I haven't given it too much thought." This, I assured him, was quite natural. I went on to explain that his approach to selecting a career was like going to an airline ticket counter and saying, "Give me a ticket." The people selling the tickets just can't help you unless you give them a destination. So I said, And I can't help you find a job until I know what your destination is. And only you can tell me that. This jarred FB into thinking. We spent the next 2 hours not talking about the merits of different kinds of jobs, but rather discussing how to set goals. FB learned, I believe, the most important lesson in career planning. Before you start out, know where you want to go. Like the Progressive Corporation, plan ahead. You are, in a sense, a business unit. Your talent, skills, and abilities are your products. You want to develop your products so they command the highest possible price. Forward planning will do it. Here are 2 steps that will help. First, visualize your future in terms of 3 departments: work, home, and social. Dividing your life this way keeps you from becoming confused, prevents conflicts, helps you look at the whole picture. Second, demand of yourself clear, precise answers to these questions. What do I want to accomplish with my life? What do I want to be? And what does it take to satisfy me? Using this planning guide will help. An image of me 10 years from now. 10 years planning guide. A. Work department. 10 years from now. 1. What income level do I want to attain? 2. What level of responsibility do I seek? 3. How much authority do I want to command? 4. What prestige do I expect to gain from my work? B. Home department, 10 years from now. 1. What kind of standard of living do I want to provide for my family and myself? 2. What kind of house do I want to live in? 3. What kind of vacations do I want to take? 4. What financial support do I want to give my children in their early adult years? C. Social department, 10 years from now. 1. What kinds of friends do I want to have? 2. What social groups do I want to join? 3. What community leadership positions would I like to hold? 4. What worthwhile causes do I want to champion? A few years ago, my young son insisted the 2 of us build a doghouse for Peanut, an intelligent pup of dubious pedigree and my son's pride and joy. His persistence and enthusiasm won, so we proceeded to build a home Peanut could call her own. Our combined carpentry talent equaled 0, and the end product clearly reflected that fact. Shortly afterward, a good friend stopped by, and upon seeing what we had done, asked, "What's that you've stuck up there among the trees? That's not a doghouse, is it?" I replied that it was. Then he pointed out just a few of our mistakes and summed it all up with, "Why didn't you get a plan? Nobody these days builds a doghouse without a blueprint." And please, as you visualize your future, don't be afraid to be blue sky. People these days are measured by the size of their dreams. No one accomplishes more than he sets out to accomplish. So visualize a big future. Here is a word-for-word excerpt from the life plan of one of my former trainees. Listen to it. Note how well this fellow visualized his home future. As he wrote this, it is obvious he really saw himself in the future. My home goal is to own a country estate. The house will be of the typical Southern manor type, 2 stories, white columns and all. We will have the grounds fenced in, and probably we'll have a fish pond or 2 on the place, as my wife and I both enjoy fishing. We will keep our Doberman kennels back of the house somewhere. The thing I have always wanted is a long winding driveway with trees lining each side. But a house is not necessarily a home. I am going to do everything I can to make our house more than just a place to eat and sleep. Of course, we do not intend to leave God out of our plans, and throughout the years we will spend a certain amount of time in church activities. 10 years from now, I want to be in a position to take a family cruise around the world. I would like very much to do this before the family gets scattered all over the world by marriages, etc. If we can't find the time to make the cruise all at once, we will put it into 4 or 5 separate vacations and visit a different part of the world each year. Naturally, all these plans in home department depend on how well things go in my work department, so I'll have to keep on the ball if I'm to accomplish all this. This plan was written 5 years ago. The trainee then owned 2 small dime stores. Now he owns 5, and he has purchased 17 acres for his country estate. He's thinking and progressing right along toward his goal. The 3 departments of your life are closely interrelated. Each depends on the others to some extent. But the one department that has the most influence over the other departments is your work. Thousands of years ago, the caveman who had the happiest home life and was most respected by his cave mates was the fellow who was most successful as a hunter. As a generalization, the same point holds true today. The standard of living we provide our families and the social and community respect we attain depends largely on our success in the work department. Not long ago, the McKinsey Foundation for Management Research conducted a large-scale study to determine what it takes to become an executive. Leaders in business, government, science, and religion were questioned. Over and over again, in different ways, these researchers kept getting one answer. The most important qualification for an executive is the sheer desire to get ahead. Remember this advice of John Wanamaker: a man is not doing much until the cause he works for possesses all there is of him. Desire, when harnessed, is power. Failure to follow desire, to do what you want to do most, paves the way to mediocrity. I recall a conversation with a very promising young writer on a college newspaper. This fellow had ability. If anyone showed promise for a career in journalism, it was he. Shortly before his graduation, I asked him, "Well, Dan, what are you going to do? Get into some form of journalism?" Dan looked at me and said, "Heck no. I like writing and reporting very much, and I've had a lot of fun working on the college paper. But journalists are a dime a dozen, and I don't want to starve." I didn't see or hear from Dan for 5 years. Then one evening I chanced to meet him in New Orleans. Dan was working as an assistant personnel director for an electronics company, and he was quick to let me know that he was quite dissatisfied with his work. "Oh, I'm reasonably well paid. I'm with a wonderful company, and I've got reasonable security. But you know, my heart isn't in it. I wish now I'd gone with a publisher or a newspaper when I finished school." Dan's attitude reflected boredom, uninterest. He was cynical about many things. He will never achieve maximum success until he quits his present job and gets into journalism. Success requires heart and soul effort, and you can put your heart and soul only into something you really desire. Had Dan followed his desire, he could have risen to the very top in some phase of communication. And over the long pull, he would have made much more money and achieved far more personal satisfaction than he will find in his present kind of work. Switching from what you don't like to do to what you do like to do is like putting a 500 horsepower motor in a 10-year-old car. All of us have desires. All of us dream of what we really want to do. But few of us actually surrender to desire. Instead of surrendering to desire, we murder it. 5 weapons are used to commit success suicide. Destroy them. They're dangerous. 1. Self-depreciation. You have heard dozens of people say, "I would like to be a doctor, or an executive, or a commercial artist, or in business for myself, but I can't do it. I lack brains. I'd fail if I tried. I lack the education and/or experience." Many young folks destroy desire with the old negative self-depreciation. 2. Security-itis. Persons who say, "I've got security where I am," use the security weapons to murder their dreams. 3. Competition. The field is already overcrowded. People in that field are standing on top of each other, are remarks which kill desire fast. 4. Parental dictation. I've heard hundreds of young people explain their career choice with, "I'd really like to prepare for something else, but my parents want me to do this, so I must." Most parents, I believe, do not intentionally dictate to their children what they must do. What all intelligent parents want is to see their children live successfully. If the young person will patiently explain why he or she prefers a different career, and if the parent will listen, there will be no friction. The objectives of both the parent and the young person for the young person's career are identical: success. 5. Family responsibility. The attitude of, "It would have been wise for me to change over 5 years ago, but now I've got a family and I can't change," illustrates this kind of desire murder weapon. Throw away those murder weapons. Remember, the only way to get full power, to develop full go force, is to do what you want to do. Surrender to desire and gain energy, enthusiasm, mental zip, and even better health. And it's never too late to let desire take over. The overwhelming majority of really successful people work much longer than 40 hours a week, and you don't hear them complain of overwork. Successful people have their eyes focused on a goal, and this provides energy. The point is this: energy increases, multiplies, when you set a desired goal and resolve to work toward that goal. Many people, millions of them, can find new energy by selecting a goal and giving all they've got to accomplish that goal. Goals cure boredom. Goals even cure many chronic ailments. Let's probe a little deeper into the power of goals. When you surrender yourself to your desires, when you let yourself become obsessed with a goal, you receive the physical power, energy, and enthusiasm needed to accomplish your goal. But you receive something else, something equally valuable. You receive the automatic instrumentation needed to keep you going straight to your objective. The most amazing thing about a deeply entrenched goal is that it keeps you on course to reach your target. This isn't double talk. What happens is this: when you surrender to your goal, the goal works itself into your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is always in balance. Your conscious mind is not, unless it is in tune with what your subconscious mind is thinking. Without full cooperation from the subconscious mind, a person is hesitant, confused, indecisive. Now, with your goal absorbed into your subconscious mind, you react the right way automatically. The conscious mind is free for clear, straight thinking. Let's illustrate this with two hypothetical persons. As you listen, you'll recognize these characters among the real people you know. We'll call them Tom and Jack. These fellows are comparable in all respects except one. Tom has a firmly entrenched goal. Jack does not. Tom has a crystal clear image of what he wants to be. He pictures himself as a corporation vice president 10 years hence. Because Tom has surrendered to his goal through his subconscious mind signals to him saying, "Do this," or "Don't do that. It won't help get you where you want to go." The goal constantly speaks, "I am the image you want to make real. Here is what you must do to make me real." Tom's goal does not pilot him in vague generalities. It gives him specific directions in all his activities. When Tom buys a suit, the goal speaks and shows Tom the wise choice. The goal helps to show Tom what steps to take to move up to the next job, what to say in the business conference, what to do when conflict develops, what to read, what stand to take. Should Tom drift a little off course, his automatic instrumentation, housed securely in his subconscious mind, alerts him and tells him what to do to get back on course. Tom's goal has made him supersensitive to all the many forces at work that affect him. Jack, on the other hand, lacking a goal, also lacks the automatic instrumentation to guide him. He is easily confused. His actions reflect no personal policy. Jack wavers, shifts, guesses at what to do. Lacking consistency of purpose, Jack flounders on the ruddy road to mediocrity. May I suggest you listen to this section again, right now. Let this concept soak in. Then look around you. Study the very top echelon of successful persons. Note how they, without exception, are totally devoted to their objective. Observe how the life of a highly successful person is integrated around a purpose. Surrender to that goal. Really surrender. Let it obsess you and give you the automatic instrumentation you need to reach that goal. On occasion, all of us have waked up on Saturday morning with no plans, no agenda, either mental or written, that spells out what we're going to do. On days like that, we accomplish next to nothing. We aimlessly drift through the day, glad when it's finally over. But when we face the day with a plan, we get things done. This common experience provides an important lesson. To accomplish something, we must plan to accomplish something. Before World War II, our scientists saw the potential power locked in the atom. But relatively little was known about how to split the atom and unleash that tremendous power. When the United States entered the war, forward-thinking scientists saw the potential power of an atomic bomb. A crash program was developed to accomplish just one goal: build an atomic bomb. The result is history. In just a few years, the concentrated effort paid off. The bombs were dropped, and the war was ended. But without that crash program to accomplish a goal, splitting the atom would have been delayed perhaps a decade, maybe longer. Set goals to get things done. Our great production system would be hopelessly bogged down if production executives did not establish and adhere to target dates and production schedules. Sales executives know salesmen sell more when they are given a carefully defined quota to sell. Professors know students get term papers written on time when a deadline is set. Now, as you press forward to success, set goals, deadlines, target dates, self-imposed quotas. You will accomplish only what you plan to accomplish. According to Dr. George E. Birch of the Tulane University School of Medicine, an expert in the study of human longevity, many things determine how long you will live: weight, heredity, diet, psychic tension, personal habits. But Dr. Birch says, the quickest way to the end is to retire and do nothing. Every human being must keep an interest in life just to keep living. Each of us has a choice. Retirement can be the beginning or the end. The do nothing but eat, sleep, and rock attitude is the poison yourself fast form of retirement. Most folks who regard retirement as the end of purposeful living soon find retirement is the end of life itself. With nothing to live for, no goals, people waste away fast. The other extreme, the sensible way to retire, is the I'm going to pitch right in and start fast method. One of my finest friends, Lou Gordon, has chosen this way to retire. Lou's retirement several years ago as a vice president of Atlanta's biggest bank was really commencement day for him. He established himself as a business consultant, and his pace is amazing. Now in his 60s, he serves numerous clients and is in national demand as a speaker. One of his special projects is helping to build Pi Sigma Epsilon, a young but fast-growing fraternity for professional salesmen and sales executives. Every time I see Lou, he seems younger. He's a young 30 in spirit. Few people I know of any age are reaping more from life than this senior citizen who resolved not to go out to pasture. And the Lou Gordons aren't the boring old grumps feeling sorry for themselves because they're old. Goals, intense goals, can keep a person alive when nothing else will. Mrs. D, the mother of a college friend of mine, contracted cancer when her son was only 2. To darken matters, her husband had died only 3 months before her illness was diagnosed. Her physicians offered little hope, but Mrs. D would not give up. She was determined that she would see her 2-year-old son through college by operating a small retail store left her by her husband. There were numerous surgical operations. Each time the doctors would say, just a few more months. The cancer was never cured, but those few more months stretched into 20 years.